safety personnel and directional exit signs to a designated safe area. At this time, please take a brief moment to locate the exit closest to you. We thank you for your attention to this very important safety message.
Good morning. Hello, everyone. If I could please ask you to move to your seats, the event is about to begin. Hello, if I could urge you please to move to your seats, that would be wonderful. We have a packed day ahead, so we're hoping to get in a lot of events, but obviously we would like to get going as soon as possible. We will give it one more minute and then we will get underway. Hello and good morning, everyone. Her Excellency, UNESCO Director General, Miss Audrey Azoulay, Your Excellencies, Ministers, Ambassadors, media and NGO leaders, ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, for those of you here in the room, but also those of you who are following this online, welcome to this special event to mark the 30th anniversary of World Press Freedom Day. I'm Michelle Fleury from the BBC and I will be guiding you through the events today. And you can expect lots of high-level, dynamic discussions ahead. So thank you very much, all of you, for taking your seats. And please, if you could take your seats for the UNESCO Director General. This year's conference is focused on the fundamental role of freedom of expression in promoting and defending all of our human rights. And so it is very appropriate and meaningful that we all find ourselves in this room, of all others, in the General Assembly Hall in the United Nations. World Press Freedom Day was created by a General Assembly proclamation back in 1993. And to mark the 30th anniversary, here is a short video capturing some of the key moments from the last 3 decades.
Today is World Press Freedom Day.
This date is
Press Freedom Day.
And this day is World Press Freedom Day.
الضحايا الصحفية التي قتلت è stato ucciso lo schiavo has been shot at.
This anniversary today is not just a reminder of the past. It is a commitment, a collective commitment to take for the future, a commitment to keeping the spirit of the Windhoek Declaration alive.
In the normal run of their work, whether they're covering wars or famines or whatever, trying to bring information to the people.
Mais nous tous, on se bat pour le droit à l'information, qui n'est pas un droit corporatiste, qui est le droit pour chacun des citoyens, chacun des êtres humains.
We must make sure that either government or non-government actors that do this to journalists are held accountable.
Today, world journalism faces perhaps the greatest challenge in a generation.
La primera definición de libertad de prensa, el respeto a la profesión del periodista, hacer que los medios sean sustentables.
Civil society groups are able to interrogate fearlessly government actions and positions.
It's amazing to work with such passionate defenders of free expression, and freedom of expression needs these passionate defenders. We all need such passionate defenders of free expression.
The ministers will underwrite with me a statement that we will do our utmost to protect journalists.
Well, on a day dedicated to press freedom around the globe, this video highlights some of the key moments of the last 30 years and all those who work so hard to defend our rights to freedom of expression. And that work is not over. In the face of growing threats to journalists and media, it is more important than ever to protect media workers and their right to report. Now, in addition to several distinguished guests and great panels that we have for you throughout the day, we also have World Press Freedom Day guest cartoonist in the room with us today, Lisa Donnelly from The New Yorker, who will be visually capturing our discussions today. Now, Lisa also represents Cartooning for Peace, an international network of cartoonists that started right here at the United Nations in 2006, and of which Lisa is a founding member. And now, to kick off this year's World Press Freedom Day commemoration, it is my honour to ask the host of today's conference, the Director General of UNESCO, Her Excellency Miss Audrey Azoulay, to open this event.
Bonjour à tous. Good morning, everyone. Excellencies, partners of the World Day for Freedom of Expression, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President of the General Conference of UNESCO. I would like first to welcome you all and thank you for being here in New York. Since 30 years, as we have seen in the video, this day gives us a day to mobilize collectively and also to look lucidly and look at the world as it is with the eyes wide open, because freedom of expression is something that reveals the state of our societies. When it regresses, it is all the rights that do regress with it. When there's a regression, there's a regression of the debates within society and are undermined. So now that the boundaries between fact and fiction are blurred and science is put in question by conspiracy theories, and so we need the space for debate and also freedom of expression. And as Maria Ressa, who is a Nobel Peace laureate, without press, there's no freedom. Without trust, there is no reality that is shared. So it's very important to face these existential issues that are we are facing now. So 30 years after the declaration of Windhoek and 30 years after the commitment of the international community that we need this press that is free, that is multiple, and it's important to take stock of all what has been accomplished and what needs to yet to be accomplished. Well, but we have to acknowledge that the effort that has been done has yielded some fruits, especially in terms of norms and standards. So 30 years ago, there are only a few countries that guarantees. Now we have more than 135. UNESCO has accompanied multiple countries like Uruguay, Namibia, and Samoa to apply these frameworks and that are now a reference. We have also progressed in terms of international cooperation, and I think also about this momentum that was for the security of journalists now 10 years ago. But we need to be also very lucid. Nothing is really acquired and accomplished. In 2022, with 86 journalists that were killed, it was the most deadly year for journalists. And it is a reason to be concerned. And we are now present in Ukraine, and since the very few weeks, we have provided protection equipment and also areas where they can work in security. And with the support with the European Union, we have supported 12 media organizations, especially to help some women journalists in Afghanistan to continue their work. And over 80% are now prevented from doing that. and for the risk for who are in the theaters of war. So 3/4 of journalists that were killed were outside the conflict. Oftentimes they were at home with their family. So this trend is just being confirmed time after time. Hundreds more of journalists have been attacked, at times imprisoned, and just because they are doing their work. It is unacceptable, and now we are thinking about all of them, because beyond their situation, it is their service that really puts into question all the functioning of society. So the level of impunity of the crimes against them sends a message that is frightening. The security of journalists, it's not a matter of just for journalists or international organization. It is a matter for society as a whole. It is the reason why we have awareness campaigns and we train justice professional and security. So we have people in the legal field that have been trained in 150 countries by UNESCO. And we worked with the International Association of Prosecutors, and we did work in 80 countries, and that look at the new threats, the digital threats, because now the threats are being transformed in this digital world. And in this regard, women are a very peculiar target. So in a report in 2021, there are 3 out of 4 women journalists were victims of online harassment. That's why we published in 2022 a number of recommendations for digital platform to better protect women journalists who are facing this situation.
New challenges faced by journalists are coming at the exact moment when we need them more than ever. Because with the advent of the digital era, the entire information landscape has changed, of course. Digital platforms have given us countless new ways for us to inform and express ourselves. But they're also providing fertile ground for those who sow disinformation and conspiracy theories. We find ourselves at a new crossroads. Our current path is leading us away from informed public debate, away from the very notion of a shared reality on which it depends, a path towards ever more polarization. The other path is one we must imagine together to ensure information can remain a public good, accessible to all. That's what our member states in 2021 affirmed in the new Windhoek Plus 30 declaration. A declaration which underlines the importance of media and information literacy to develop critical mindsets to navigate these new flows. In 2021, we launched a model curriculum for teachers in the digital ecosystem. And we are supporting at least 20 countries to develop educational policies in media and information literacy in the digital era. But this Windhoek Plus 30 declaration also concerns digital platforms themselves, especially given that the business models of platforms based on clicks all too often favor sensationalism over truth. This is why last February, UNESCO organized a major global conference in Paris on this subject, bringing together over 4,000 stakeholders. It was a decisive step towards the publication later this year of a set of guidelines with a focus on the moderation and curation of content, as we did for broadcasting nearly 20 years ago, always with the same goal, to ensure that technology helps our shared values and promotes human rights rather than harming them. It was the same objective which led to the adoption of the first UN normative instrument on the ethics of artificial intelligence in November 21 at UNESCO. And every day, also in the field of the information ecosystem, we see more and more reasons why it must be implemented at the national level in every country. This recommendation sets out a series of rules and principles, notably to ensure that algorithms, which play such an important role in identifying and prioritizing information, respect human rights and the principles of transparency, equality, and non-discrimination. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, to secure our right to overcome the existential challenges that lie ahead, we need professional journalists who can do their job freely. Like those honored each year by our UNESCO Guillermo Cano World Press Freedom Prize, and we will be this evening announcing this year's laureates. In short, we need more than ever professional, free, independent journalism, a press that deciphers, discloses, and decodes. And it is up to us, collectively, to ensure its continued existence. And it's the meaning of our collective mobilization here today in this very special place. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention.
Director General Audrey Azoulay, for your important leadership, reminding us that attacks and threats on freedom of expression and the safety of journalists are threats to all of us and to all our human rights. On this occasion, we now also have a special video message from the UN Secretary General, His Excellency, Mr. Antonio Guterres.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank UNESCO for organizing this important global event. And I welcome the many partners joining us, including leaders from across the media industry, non-governmental organizations, and especially journalists and media professionals themselves. For 3 decades, on World Press Freedom Day, the international community has celebrated the work of journalists and media workers. This day highlights a basic truth. All our freedom depends on press freedom. Freedom of the press is the foundation of democracy and justice. It gives all of us the facts we need to shape opinions and speak truth to power. And as this year's theme reminds us, press freedom represents the very lifeblood of human rights. But in every corner of the world, freedom of the press is under attack. Truth is threatened by disinformation and hate speech seeking to blur the lines between fact and fiction, between science and conspiracy. The increased concentration of the media industry into the hands of a few, the financial collapse of scores of independent news organizations, and an increase of national laws and regulations that stifle journalists are further expanding censorship and threatening freedom of expression. Meanwhile, journalists and media workers are directly targeted on and offline as they carry out their vital work. They are routinely harassed, intimidated, detained, and imprisoned. At least 67 media workers were killed in 2022, an unbelievable 50% increase over the previous year. Nearly 3/4 of women journalists have experienced violence online, and 1 in 4 have been threatened physically. 10 years ago, the United Nations established a plan of action on the safety of journalists to protect media workers and then the impunity for crimes committed against them. On this and every World Press Freedom Day, the world must speak with one voice. Stop the threats and attacks. Stop detaining and imprisoning journalists for doing their jobs. Stop the lies and disinformation. Stop targeting truth and truth tellers. As journalists stand up for truth, the world stands up with them.
Powerful words there. You just heard the call by the UN Secretary General for all of us to work together to protect those who speak truth to power and who risk their lives in their work to inform us. He also underlined the key role of freedom of expression as an enabler of all other human rights. Well, one media outlet that represents this is the New York Times. It is an honor to invite our first keynote speaker, Mr. A.G. Sulzberger, chairman and publisher of the New York Times, to the stage. Mr. Sulzberger leads the work of this world-renowned news organization and its more than 2,000 people reporting from all across the globe, often in difficult environments, both at home and abroad. He's also the author of the Innovation Report, and he played a central role in the company's digital transformation. We welcome Mr. Sulzberger to the floor.
Thank you, Michelle. And thank you to UNESCO and the United Nations for inviting me to speak with you on World Press Freedom Day. It's heartening to be here with so many great journalists and so many more from around the world who stand up for journalists and the rights that make our work possible. You have my admiration and gratitude, especially those of you fighting for the public's right to know in places where press freedoms remain dangerously contested. 30 years ago, the UN General Assembly established World Press Freedom Day as an opportunity to bring the international community together each year to recognize the importance of press freedom and the foundational role that journalists play in supporting human rights in free societies. I'm here to tell you today that this vision is at great risk. All over the world, independent journalists and press freedoms are under attack. Without journalists to provide news and information that people can depend on, I fear we will continue to see the unraveling of civic bonds, the erosion of democratic norms, and the weakening of the trust in institutions and in each other that is so essential to the global order. But let's rewind to that moment of great optimism 30 years ago. The fears, divisions, and dangers of the Cold War had seemingly subsided. The emergence of new, if fragile, democracies promised expanded freedoms for millions. Technological advancements hinted at a way of making people all over the world more informed and more connected. And news organizations, then enjoying historic financial strength, seemed well-positioned to provide trustworthy information for a public eager to understand and engage with the broader world. But rather than heralding a new global embrace of journalism, this moment proved to be a short-lived high point. The same technology that gave journalists the opportunity to reach people everywhere also eroded the business models of news, forcing many thousands of newspapers around the world. The digital outlets that emerged in their place were unable to fill that void, particularly in providing the local and investigative reporting that society so depends on. And the internet also unleashed the avalanche of misinformation, propaganda, punditry, and clickbait that now overwhelms our information ecosystem, often drowning out credible journalism and accelerating the decline in societal trust. When the free press erodes, democratic erosion almost always follows. And sure enough, this period of weakness for the press has coincided with destabilized democracies and emboldened autocracies. And when democracy erodes, you can be sure that the free press will be the first target. All over the world, autocrats and those who aspire to join their ranks have used censorship, media repression, and attacks on journalists to consolidate power. That's because gaining control of information is essential to gaining control of everything else. In countries where press freedoms were strong, including the United States, journalists now face systematic campaigns to undermine their credibility, followed by attacks on the legal protections that safeguard their work. In countries where press freedoms were already weak, journalists now face surging levels of violence, detention, and harassment. As you've heard, more journalists are being killed today for their work, and the number of imprisoned journalists has reached a grim new record. Spin a globe and you'll find examples of these trends. In China, journalists are surveilled, intimidated, and jailed. In Hungary, the government has rewritten laws to gain near total control over the press. In Egypt, the government has used security services to buy up outlets and block uncooperative news sites. In Nicaragua, sustained crackdowns have forced journalists into exile. In India, authorities have raided newsrooms and treated journalists essentially as terrorists. And in Russia, journalists who dare to even acknowledge the war in Ukraine face long prison terms. And here I want to draw attention to my former Times colleague, Evan Gershkovich, who's now a reporter at the Wall Street Journal and remains in Russian custody for sham charges and should be released. The cumulative story, as you'll hear from panelists today, is of a worldwide assault on journalists, their work, and the public's right to know. And it will only be solved if the nations that make up this body take action. For nations with a strong tradition of a free press, including the United States, this means leaders standing up to secure legal protections for independent reporters and their sources. For nations where reporting the truth remains perilous, this means the international community must make clear that we'll call out and punish the crackdowns and attacks against journalists no matter where they occur. These steps alone will not address the challenges facing the press. We still need a clear financial model for sustaining independent journalism. We still need a commitment from the digital giants to elevate independent journalism and ensure it stands apart from untrustworthy information on their platforms. And we still need more of the public to value independent journalism enough to support it with their time, their money, and their trust. I make these entreaties today with little optimism. I've repeated this message to global leaders for more than 6 years, both in private and in large gatherings such as this. And yet the climate for press freedom has only become darker. But at the same time, it's impossible not to be inspired by the way journalists continue to respond to these challenges. People like Maria Ressa, Jose Ruben Zamora, Papale Niang, and Austin Tice. Or to feel compelled to carry on the work of people like Jamal Khashoggi, Daphne Caruana Galizia, Anna Politkovskaya. In an era of misinformation, countless journalists such as these around the world are fighting for the truth. In an era of propaganda and strongmen, they're relentlessly pursuing accountability. And in an era of polarization, they're fostering understanding. Truth, accountability, understanding. And these are powerful gifts to the world. 30 years ago, the UN established World Press Freedom Day in recognition of the unbreakable connection between journalists being free to seek the truth and share it with the public, and the health of the societies we serve. Today, I ask the collected global leaders who make up the United Nations to ensure journalists everywhere can continue their essential work without fear of intimidation or reprisal. For it is their work that helps make your people freer, your societies more just, and the entire world better equipped to tackle its biggest challenges. Thank you all for all you do.
Thank you to Mr. Sulzberger for his wise words, but also a reminder not just of the dangers that exist out there for journalists, but also of the positive, inspirational aspects of our job. He has helped set the scene for today's discussion, in which many of the following panels will look at the role of freedom of expression as a driver and an enabler for all human rights. First, though, we're going to have some artistic inspiration, and we have a real treat for you today. We have a Grammy Award-winning author, poet, and spoken word artist, someone who is the favorite poet, I should say, of celebrities ranging from Dave Chappelle to the well-being guru Deepak Chopra. He is also on a Netflix special, so please join me in welcoming Jay Ivey.
I once wrote a poem, selfishly, religiously, passionately I wrote for me. This poem wasn't for the world to see. It was just for my eyes. Every metaphor, every simile, every secret, every good and bad memory belonged to me. Without scrutiny or judgment, I surrendered to my vulnerability. And while staring at the tears on the page, it was here and only here that I truly felt free. But as time passed, I found the courage to share this guarded piece of my history, my honesty. And in that moment, somewhere in the midst of this terrifying exchange, a connection was made as we found our commonality. In that moment, we were reminded of our humanity as we laughed together, cried together, we healed together. We were reminded that it's our stories that bring us together, that allow us to see each other, find compassion for one another. Our stories break down the walls that divide us. They tear through the stereotypes that lie to us. Our stories drive us to new perspective, new ideas. Our stories, our words, have power. Our words are the building blocks of our existence. Our words meet at the crossroads of free thought and our spirits. Our words make room, provide space. Our words encapsulate our time here. They liberate. Our words educate. We're not of this world. No, not this world. Not the world that attacks free speech, where hate is scattered about like broken glass, where class trumps love, where trauma strikes like the lightning above. We're not of this world. A world where hunger hangs in the rafters like championship banners, where manners and morals are manipulated by temptation and power, perks, privilege, and money, where judgment towers from those who rest in ivory towers. We're not of this world, not this world, where excellence is envied, where our cities have tent cities, where stories like Emmett Till haunts our history. We have a history, a habit, a race theory, a judgment, a jury, drowned towns and massacres, those who have chose to be masters of people, masters of her and her body. That's her body. We're not of this world. A world that vowed to hurt everybody. Body snatchers that would snatch your body. My brother said, Jay, they don't want your body. They want your soul. He said when a prisoner dies in prison, they're quick to let the body go. No, not this world, where heroes are muted, where churches are looted on live streams. I've seen so many who have had dreams get signed, swallowed up, shelved, and then put out in the cold like a deer standing high beams. How does it feel? Like a Mack truck? Like Muhammad Ali's jab punch? Like his uppercut? How does it feel? The mass shootings are too often too real. This assimilation being played in real time. Are we truly a civilization? These uncivil moments are real times. I'm hurting for you and yours while I'm still trying to heal me and mine, rain or shine. You can clearly see that the oppression is by design. Why else would you steal my truth, my identity, and make it hide? Centuries later, why can't I speak my native tongue or name my tribe? It's a miracle we came to this world and survived. A time where you can see people of color tortured and murdered on IG Live, on Ring. I've seen the loss of several lives. No, we're not of this world that's blanketed by bullies, that's governed by greed. killed by ignorance and ungodliness, a sickness and illness. Here the food is cancerous. Mothers fear their children run to the streets because they're ruled by the dangerous. No, we're not of this world, a world where nightmares dream of better days, where a doctor would see a black woman kicking and screaming and tell her she can tolerate the pain. No, we're not of this world. We're from a land of oat milk and honey, where the demise of another isn't entertaining, nor is it funny. We're not of this world. We're from the heavens. Our soul is the evidence. We're from a world of abundance where everyone is treated with reverence, where everyone is beautiful and inviting. The spirit I speak of is guiding this writing. No, we're not of this world. But when you look to the sky, know that we are the light that you see in the sightings. We're not of this world, not this world. But while we're here sharing this precious time together, it's so important that we remember it is our human right to report our truths, to write our stories, to protect the voices of the young and the old. But for those that disagree, know that you will not mute our hearts. You will never silence our souls. Thank you.
A reminder there from Jay Ivey of the power of words. Now, for this World Press Freedom Day, we want to highlight a basic truth, that all our freedom depends on press freedom. In light of that, we are encouraging our partners to share a single message: everything is all right. Because news that always gives the impression that everything is all right, that fails to report on hard truths, is compromised. And when journalism is compromised, we cannot protect human rights. To amplify this message, we invite all of you in this room and those following us online to share the campaign with the hashtag World Press Freedom Day, and to share your views and thoughts on everything that you hear in this room today. And with that, we come to the end of the opening ceremony. And before we start our next session, let's look back at some more key moments of the past 30 years, commemorating World Press Freedom Day and the critical role that civil society plays.
We must make sure that either government or non-government actors that do this to journalists are held accountable.
We're at this existential moment where we must do something to make sure that the platforms that deliver the news, because of their business model, that they do not insidiously manipulate us to tear democracy down.
Join us in demanding justice. Join us in standing up for justice. Join us in acting for justice.
Civil society groups are able to interrogate fearlessly government actions and positions, compare them to global best practices, and offer views and critiques aimed at complementing the efforts of government.
Without freedom of the press, there are no real democratic societies. Without freedom of the press, there is no freedom.
Stakeholders, and of course that video reminds us of the critical role that civil society plays. So, How are press freedoms linked to human rights? We've been talking about that all morning, but let's sort of bring that together. Without access to information and freedom of expression, we can't make informed decisions. Our democratic processes can be undermined or weakened through dis and misinformation. Hate speech risks fueling divisions and conflicts. In a survey conducted by the UN, many of the peace holders responded that disinformation poses a threat to their safety and ability to carry out their important missions. The climate crisis and all of its consequences can't be tackled if people around the world receive non-impartial news. They need verified information. In many of the world's war and conflict zones, humanitarian information is central in ensuring that people can access life-saving humanitarian aid. If the COVID-19 pandemic has taught us one thing, then it is that our right to health is centrally dependent on accessing verified information, as well as the dangerous consequences that the disinfodemic can have. Without freedom of expression, the right to education, children's and women's rights are also in danger, as we will hear from our panelists in just a minute. At this juncture, I'd like to invite to the stage Kristen Salumi, correspondent of Al Jazeera, who will be leading our first panel today, and Mr. Felipe Neto, a communicator and digital influencer from Brazil. Across his platforms, Mr. Neto reaches more than 90 million followers. He is actively involved in fighting misinformation and disinformation, and he is an advocate of greater responsibilities of platforms to address harmful content, as well as improved access to information.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you, Mr. Neto, for being here with us on World Press Freedom Day. You have, I'm told, 90 million followers across platforms on social media. Traditional news organizations can only dream about having an audience like that. But you've also faced legal challenges that I think traditional news organizations would probably be better, more experienced in handling, shall we say. Can you talk about how that was for you? You've been charged legally for what you've said online, accused of all sorts of things. Were you prepared for that as an influencer?
No, absolutely not. Being accused of the things I was accused was the hardest thing I ever had to deal with. And it's one thing they try to do when they can't corrupt you. They try to corrupt your soul and your image in the eyes of the audience. So when I started to really fight Bolsonaro's regime, I don't know if you know Bolsonaro. If you don't, you're very lucky. But if you do, you know what I'm talking about. And when I started really fighting his governments and his ways, I had to fight an entire industry of misinformation and defamation. So they accused me of child corruption. And it wasn't just online accusations. An investigator concluded that I was a child corrupter because in my old videos I used to say curse words, you know, just bad words that every YouTuber in the world use. And because of that, I was accused, I was legally accused. After that, because they didn't manage to put me in jail, they tried to accuse me of threat of national security because I called the president a genocidal. He is a genocidal, and I will keep saying that all over the world. For the crimes he committed, he should be facing a genocidal indictment. So after everything that I had to deal with, I didn't have, of course, any preparing, but I had the resources to fight it. But a lot of people don't. So that's why I decided to create in Brazil an organization to defend people who were also persecuted by Bolsonaro's regime, and we were able to defend dozens of people for free once they faced the criminal charges that Bolsonaro tried to input in them. So I'm very proud of the work that the lawyers had, and I believe we all need to unite to defend people that are facing these kinds of threats, because it's not easy to deal with this.
So you started this foundation to help other people who are facing persecution, but you've also advocated for fighting misinformation and disinformation. So how do we do that without chilling free speech?
That's the $1 billion question, right? People all around the world are trying to understand how to regulate and how to make companies responsible for the posts, and but not threatening free speech, right? So we need to find the right balance. That's the hardest thing to do. What we're looking at right now is trying to make companies act on a larger scale instead of just focusing on individual content. And that is something that we need to really understand. If we try to focus on every single post, then we create this atmosphere of deleting everything that the companies can delete, so they're not being held responsible. So what we need to do is try to make them create systems of regulating the posts in order to understand the context of what's being posted. And the algorithm, that is where the real problem lies, the algorithm, we need transparency and we need responsibility on recommendations. Recommendations are by far the biggest problem that we have online. So the companies, they want to be able to use you to sell advertisement. And because of that, democracies are being threatened. That's how far it goes. So unless we really focus on the algorithms and understand that the attention economy is one of the most problematic things that we ever had in society, we will not be able to face the problem. So companies need to sit down with specialists and understand how can we focus on attention economy in order to prevent algorithms from brainwashing people and making them radicals, because they need you to stay more time online. That's why they keep showing you videos and posts that will radicalize you, because that's the most efficient way to make you stay online. I'm a content creator. All my life, I was trained to make you stay online. I know all the guidelines, all the advices that YouTube or Facebook or Twitter or Instagram give you when you're a big creator. And they knowingly do this trying to make you get addicted. So we need to understand how the system works and attack the system of algorithms. We need transparency, and we need recommendations to be highlighted as recommendation. Otherwise, people will continue to get a flux of radical content and continue to get addicted to things that will radicalize them. And of course, autoplay, that is a disease inside of our internet, and a disease that not a lot of people are talking about. We need to fight autoplay. That is one of the biggest weapons that radicalization uses to make people turn into this, what we're seeing right now.
And education, as you say, has been a big part of your advocacy work. So if we can't get our governments and our social media companies on board quickly enough, what else are you doing to try to spread this message?
Absolutely. I mean, everybody who has the power to influence someone, and that is everyone. Like, we are all influencers, right? Even if you influence just your child or just your mother, you're an influencer. You're impacting a life. So if it's 1 or 10 million, it doesn't matter. You need to do your part. So in Brazil, I created a Vero Institute that works on digital education. So what we believe is we created the biggest weapon humankind has ever developed, and that is the internet, the connection. Our whole future is going to be digital, and we all know that it is kind of scary, but the metaverse and everything we're seeing happening, artificial intelligence, that's all going to be a very strong reality very soon. And we created and developed this weapon that can be used for good, but we gave to all humanity without any kind of manual or instructions. So we need education. So that's what Vero Institute is doing in Brazil right now. We're working every day, 24/7, trying to bring not only to children, because a lot of people, when we talk about digital education, people focus on children. Sometimes children are not the main problem when we're talking about education, because they're rising in a world where they comprehend digital world even better than our adults, right? So we need to educate our adults. We need to educate people who, when they were young, they didn't have a smartphone. They were not digitally connected. So, and these are the people who are regulating systems, and they're discussing in parliaments and etc. So we need to bring education to them. So that's what Vero Institute is doing right now in Brazil. That's the problems that we're facing, and we're trying our best to bring education to people, and we're going to continue to do that.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Neto, for your advocacy and for your comments and highlighting the connection between these important rights: free speech, free press, and the right to an education.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me.
I want to thank Mr. Neto for your call on all of us to tackle dis and misinformation online, and highlighting that inextricable link between freedom of expression and right to education. It is now an honor to invite to the stage the panelists for our first group discussion. Agnes Kalamar, Secretary General, Amnesty International; Masih Alinejad, journalist and women's rights campaigner; David Rode, Executive Editor, NewYorker.com; Yelitsa Aparicio, Indigenous rights activist and UNESCO Goodwill Ambassador. And now I'd like to hand over to the moderator of this exchange, Mr. Maher Nasser, who is the Director of the Outreach Division in the UN Department of Global Communications.
Well, thank you, Kristen. Excellencies, friends, colleagues, good morning, and also to everyone following this virtually. I'm very honored to moderate this panel on speaking out for our rights, and more so to be with this distinguished panelists here. As the panel is entitled Speak Out for Our Rights, I would like to address the first question to Ms. Kalamar. Philippe Neto has just set the stage for our discussion and has shared some of the very personal experiences in fighting for human rights, but also a personal toll and cost this could have. You've dedicated your life to the defense of human rights, both specifically on the right of freedom of expression when leading the NGO Article 19, Columbia University's Global Freedom of Expression Project, and as UN Special Rapporteur for extrajudicial, summary, or arbitrary executions, as well as on all human rights when you worked for Amnesty International and now as the Secretary General of Amnesty International. So with this in mind, what is, in your opinion, the key element that makes freedom of expression a driver for all human rights? And please feel free to use examples from the various roles that you have held.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be joining you today. 2 weeks ago, I was in Bangkok, where I had the opportunity to meet with the next generation of fighters, 15, 16, 17-year-old protesters, freedom of expression activists who have been imprisoned, beaten, some of whom are still in prison. And when I asked them why they're doing what they're doing, they told me, if they don't protest for those fundamental freedoms, they have no future. They have no future. When I was reflecting on your question, I thought that's it, that's the heart of it. Freedom of expression is essential to our future because it is essential and it is at heart about our autonomy as human beings. At heart, it is about our free will and about our dignity. Censorship denies us the right to make moral judgment. It prevents us from engaging in the search for knowledge and the search for truth. that very search which makes better government and better societies. Courts around the world have recognized the clear link between freedom of expression, freedom of the press, democracy, good governance. It is one of the essential foundations of democratic society, one of its basic conditions for progress and for the development of every man and woman. It is a cornerstone upon which the very existence of a democratic society rests. It is indispensable for the formation of public opinion. Freedom of expression and press freedom are central to the realization of our rights. They leverage those rights. There is no right to health without freedom of information and expression. Remember the pandemic. There is no right to a healthy environment without freedom of expression and information. Indeed, there is no dignity and life where censorship prevails. Think of the work of economist Amartya Sen on famine. He observed that there has not been a substantial famine in the history of the world in a functioning democracy with a free press. There is no truth without freedom of expression and information. In South Africa, the Constitutional Court has held that very strongly when it said that truth-telling was a moral basis of a transition from the injustice of apartheid to democracy and constitutionalism. Sadly, censorship has become the default position of many governments intent of controlling the knowledge of their societies, bending them to their will. But all that is being bent right now is our future.
Thank you very much for sharing your perspective and your emphasis on censorship as being the opposite of course, what today represents World Press Freedom Day. I would like now to return to Ms. Masih Ali Najad, outspoken activist and advocate for women's rights. We should all be. From your personal experience, you once said, "My weapon is my voice." What role does and has freedom of expression and access to information played in your own personal activism for human rights?
Thank you so much. Yes, my voice is my weapon. As you hear, I'm very loud. I'm coming from a country, Iran, where being a journalist is a crime. I'm coming from a country where actually being a journalist and citizen journalist can land you in jail, can get you killed, can get you tortured. Here in General Assembly, you have spoken the leaders of democratic countries expressing about freedom of expression. But also, you heard from the leaders of the Islamic Republic, the biggest enemy of free press, the biggest enemy of journalists. Here, the notorious president of Islamic Republic hold a picture of Qasem Soleimani, who is well known of transnational repression. And that is why I'm very happy today being here, because I want to call on General Assembly. I want to call member states to actually, I want to offer a resolution against transnational repression. Because right now that I'm talking to you, the UK government actually asked one of the biggest TV, Iran International, to stop his activities and to move from the UK. It was an advice. So I want to call on you, the UK government. Imagine it was not the journalists. Imagine it was member states here. If you received death threats from terrorist organizations like Revolutionary Guards, what would you do? You put the Revolutionary Guards on the terrorist list in the first step, and second step, you take actions against those who threatened you. There is biggest TV, Manoto TV in England as well, BBC as well. There are journalists being banned from doing any activities, or their properties being, confiscated by the Islamic Republic. So that is why I want to call the US and UK government to take the lead and General Assembly to pass this transnational, resolution, because this is very important. Right now, more than 70 journalists are in prison in Iran. Iran is the biggest prison for journalists, and not that, citizen journalists. Ghazaleh was filming her own killer in Iran protest recently. She got killed. Shirin Alizadeh, another citizen journalist, she filmed, her crime was filming the oppression in the street, the crackdown. She got shot in head and she got killed. And as I said, it's not just journalists inside Iran. Ruhollah Zam was another journalist. He was tricked from France to Iraq, and from Iraq to Iran, and in a sham trial, he was sentenced to execution. The father of 2 small children got executed. And I'm another example here. I was the target of the Islamic Republic to be kidnapped. If it was not the FBI arresting the man with loaded gun, AK-47, in front of my house, I would have been killed, and you were here in condemning the Islamic Republic. But I'm here to ask you that we have to take a strong action. If not, you will face all these terrorists on US soil, on UK soil. And I believe that this is the first step, an important step that we can support freedom of press. Otherwise, I mean, empty words is not going to help us at all.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing your personal experience and thoughts. So my next question is to David Rode. David, before you assumed your current role as executive editor of The New Yorker, you won the Pulitzer Prize for International Reporting in 1996 for your coverage of the Srebrenica massacre, reporting at the time for the Christian Science Monitor. And later you shared a Pulitzer for your coverage on Afghanistan and Pakistan. Based on your extensive and impressive experience, what role does journalism play in uncovering human rights abuses and defending human rights? How do you see this as having evolved since you started your career?
Thank you. It's an honor to be part of this panel with these amazingly brave activists. I want to be optimistic. I think that journalists, whether they're citizen journalists and activists or NGOs, are exposing more human rights abuses, more corruption, more suppression of democracy, I think, than ever. And that is why you see so much repression happening today. That's why there's a record number of journalists in jail, as A.G. Sulzberger mentioned already. That's why you have so many human rights organizations, I think, targeted by autocratic regimes. And I think it's important for us to be optimistic and to continue fighting. It's sort of a double-edged sword. I think technology, social media, helps document crimes. They document crimes here in the United States. The murder of George Floyd and other police abuses occur because of technology, and are made public because of technology, and that's a very positive thing. Masi has done an amazing job of using social media to expose the world to what's happening in Iran. That's a positive thing, but we have to face the need to fight back. The fact that so many women are abused on social media when they do use their voices. And it's a strange, contradictory moment, I think, in the world right now. Online, you have freedom, a powerful platform to express your views. At the same time, everyone, particularly women and people of color, are more vulnerable to horrible attacks online. You have democracies, I think, and young people in a new generation fighting for power and rights more than ever, but you have autocracies pushing back against them around the world. So I think things are improving. I'm proud of all the work that journalists have done, from mainstream journalists at different news organizations to local journalists. Local journalists face the biggest threats. More local journalists are in jail in countries around the world, in Iran and Russia and China, than in this country, and they're the bravest journalists of all. So it's a critical moment to keep fighting, whether it's human rights or journalism, to keep pushing and getting out information, getting out truth, and fighting for accountability.
Thank you, David, and thank you for also ending on a positive note, that there is hope, because we have to keep that alive, because if we don't have hope, then we give up on the fight, and the fight for press freedom is everybody's fight. Thank you. So now I would like to come back to the theme of freedom of expression as an enabler for all other human rights, and to turn to our fourth panelist, Ms. Yelitsa Aparicio, the UNESCO Goodwill Ambassador for Indigenous Peoples. In 2019, Time magazine named you as one of the 100 most influential people in the world. You have repeatedly raised your voice in defense of indigenous rights, the right to education and to fight racism, and also you have criticized the underrepresentation of indigenous peoples and voices in the media. In your view, what role does the freedom of expression play in promoting diversity and indigenous rights? And Yelitsa will answer in Spanish, so if you want to put your earpiece, unless you speak Spanish. Please.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for this invitation. Thank you for always allowing me to be the spokesperson of the indigenous communities, and for allowing us to have more representation in different media, in different places, and in the different activities. The freedom of expression is very important for everyone. Unfortunately, many of us have only discovered this slowly. I have been doing this for maybe 5 years when I discovered that my voice had a power, like the power of our voices. And when I discovered I had the opportunity to talk and to say what was happening in many places, and also what was happening to me at the time. Media is the connection with the rest of society. It is a link. I am part of these, and I have learned many things about that are happening around me. And many times you don't give yourself a chance to learn about this until you open up your horizons. For indigenous people, we have community radio, and this is how we get information in our original languages. These allow us to learn what's going on beyond what our eyes can see. Unfortunately, however, there are many places in the world, many countries, in which the right to have in your own community radio is not a right. The community radios have brought information to us, and they allow us to have the opportunity to dream, to fight for what we want. And many times we don't know what we can do, but I do remember that because of this media, I was able for the first time to learn that my country had something called legitimate defense, legal defense. There are many women that have suffered. They are in jail. They are paying for crimes that they have not committed, that they are serving sentences they shouldn't be serving. So I wondered to myself, what if we were allowed to have more community radio so that the messages do reach all these places in all these languages, and to reach more people where they are, so that we can learn that there is this right. There are laws that protect us. There are rights that we do not know we have. Then all this may change. They would change things, and we would have more opportunities. We would have more diversity. We would have respect. We would demand this from society, but many times we ourselves don't actually respect ourselves. This would make a big change. Freedom of expression makes a big difference. We should demand this freedom of expression in many languages. That is something that could help us very much. It could help everybody. And while it is difficult, and many journalists have risked their lives, they still deserve respect and admiration. And I'm thankful that they do this in spite of what's happening. I thank them for helping society learn about important things and that help us change.
Staying on the topic of shrinking spaces that we see around the world, attacks on journalists, human rights defenders, democratic values, social media was and still is one of our key tools in advocating for change. So I come back to you, Masih. Can you share with us some of your experiences on the role that social media and the ability to connect to your audience through it has meant in advocating for change?
Of course, I mean, social media is our tool in Iran to fight back the censorship. And for that, the Islamic Republic is scared of the social media. How ironic that the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic, Ali Khamenei, banned 80 million people from using internet, from using Twitter, from using Instagram and Facebook. But they all have accounts on the same platform, so enjoying their freedom of speech to mislead the rest of the world from what's going on inside Iran. Yes, I and many other journalists outside Iran trying to echo the voice of citizen journalists who are using their social media to echo their voice. And I remember that in 2019, the Iranian regime, actually, when they found out the power of social media can actually put them in the spotlight, what they did, they shut down the internet. In 3 days, they killed 1,500 innocent protesters. And we didn't know what's going on inside Iran. Immediately, when people found the power to get back to internet, we got bombarded by photos and videos of people who got killed in Iran protests. One of them was a citizen journalist called Puya Bakhtiari. Puya Bakhtiari was only 30 years old. What happened to him? He was hand in hand with his mother, filming the protest with his mobile phone. This is Puya Bakhtiari. And immediately, when the tear gas actually was thrown by the Iranian regime, the mother lost her son, and her son got killed in front of her mother's eyes. What happened? Now the mother became her voice using social media, just like, you know, having Instagram page, posting a photo and crying for justice. Nahid Shirpishe now is in prison. It has been almost a year, and that's her crime, just because of having Instagram account and saying no to Islamic Republic. And this is one of the examples. Many mothers for justice trying to expose the corruption, trying to expose the violence. And what happened recently, a group of mothers, actually, it was a suspicious accident. And one mother of Farhad Mojaddam, got killed in the suspicious accident. Why? Because they're using social media. So for Mahsa Amini was only 22 years old. She got killed in the hand of morality police. For years and years, I've been the one warning about the danger of morality police on my social media under the hashtag called "My camera is my weapon." So the world were like saying, compulsory hijab is not a big deal. Right after when Mahsa got killed, you found out that Iranian women across the country, like more than 100 cities, they took to the streets shoulder to shoulder with men. What happened? 500 innocent people got killed. So that shows you that the power of social media is very important, and the Iranian regime knows that. And this is the moment that the tech companies can kick out the dictators from social media until the day that the Iranian people enjoy the same freedom. I mean, is that too much to ask? And that is why Iranian people are really, really now frustrated, because they see that they don't have free media. Nilufar, I always want to name people because to me they are not just numbers or statistics. Nilufar Hamedi and Elahe Mohammadi, two journalists, they were the one they actually covered the story of Mahsa Amini, who got killed in the hand of morality police. Both of them are still in prison. And their family members are not even allowed to give interview to media outside Iran. So in this moment, social media is the tool that can help us but became against us. because the Iranian regime, they know how to spread misinformation. As you mentioned, they know how to bully journalists, how to spread fake information about us. I myself, the Iranian regime used social media and said that Masih Alinejad was raped by 3 men. It was fake. But in their eyes, they think that if I get raped, it's my fault. So they're using social media. So Masih is an agent of CIA, agent of MI6, agent of Mossad. I don't know how come at the same time I can work with different agents. They don't know that we, the journalists, women, we have agency. So they try to actually silence us by going after our family members inside Iran, sending killers outside Iran, bullying us and spreading misinformation on social media. And that is why I want to call you, member states, help us to kick out dictators from social media.
Thank you. Thank you, Masih. So we've heard this morning David, we heard just now reference to the power of social media, the growing impact it has on society today. We see rapid advances in digital technologies, ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, AI, social media, and so on, some of which has opened new avenues for journalism, particularly citizen journalism, reporting on human rights. At the same time, digital advances have also raised questions about human agency, privacy, increased use of digital online attacks, surveillance of human rights defenders and journalists. Where do you see this connection and what needs to be done to harness a more positive role of technology in journalism to promote human rights?
Thank you. This is a very difficult question to answer. But again, I think I want to talk about one specific challenge that we face, which is a type of software many of you have probably heard of called Pegasus. It's created by an Israeli company called NSO, and it can infect your cell phone without you knowing it. You don't need to accept an email. They literally can, and it can get inside your phone, see all the photos that are in your phone, see all the emails. It's been used in dozens of countries around the world by governments. The FBI got a version of Pegasus. It said to test it. The U.S. government says that they're not using it, but this shows, again, I talked this double-edged sword of technology and the dangers of surveillance for human rights activists and journalists around the world. Again, I think the answer is exposing the use of Pegasus, journalists writing about it. So I work at the New Yorker now. My colleague Ronan Farrow has done a series of investigative stories about NSO, this Israeli company that created Pegasus, and many other competitors are creating similar software now, and investigated NSO and the American investors. There are American private equity firms that are investing in NSO as it produces this kind of software. Recently at the Summit for the Americas, the Summit for Democracy, the U.S. government has said that the U.S. government will not use this software, and the U.S. government won't do business with any company that uses Pegasus software. That's a step forward. There is an NGO many of you may know about called Citizen Lab. They are based in Canada, but worldwide have gone out to help human rights activists in different countries and journalists. They will inspect your phone and see if it has been infected with Pegasus or similar spyware, and whether you are revealing sources without even realizing it. Citizen Lab does tremendous work. So I would say that the challenge is to keep working together, to keep using technology to get our journalism out, to get our stories out, as Yalitza talked about, in terms of human rights abuses and representation, and to be innovative, to be just as innovative as the bad actors. If we work together with places like Citizen Lab, if there's traditional journalism like the New York Times does, and as my colleague Ronan Farrow does in the New Yorker, we can fight back. We must fight back. And when technology is used against us, we should use technology to push back against these nefarious actors, these regimes that want to silence us.
Thank you. So there is an antidote to Pegasus?
The antidote is Citizen Lab and other other organizations that can find it on your phone. There is a way to remove it from your phone, but you have to sort of constantly check and make sure. But the antidote is sunlight. The antidote is, and again, Ronan has written about this, about the investors who support NSO and try to make money from this. There's been great reporting by Reuters as well about different other governments in the Middle East using Pegasus. And I think, again, that when you expose companies that are doing this, when you expose governments that are using these tactics, it puts pressure on them. If they will be deadly like Iran's regime, that's a bigger challenge, but we have to fight back in every way we can.
If I may, I think
please.
the best antidote is a moratorium or a ban.
Yes.
These are absolute, you used the word transnational repression. This is the 21st century through which governments around the world are repressing their own citizens in extraterritorially. This is unacceptable for human dignity, for human autonomy, for human rights. We need a moratorium on the development, the use, the sale of those weapons, and we need a complete ban on those whose implications and impact on our rights are absolutely negative. There is no other alternative.
And it's not actually the dictators oppressing their own citizens. Since 2014 till now, it has been more than 700 dissidents and journalists outside autocracy and dictatorship being the target of dictators. So you see, it just breaks my heart that from China to Russia to Venezuela, all the dictators are more united to end democracy compared to the democratic countries. We are not as united as them. And that is why I believe that the transnational repression and this resolution, it's very important, and the UK government, the US government, they must take the lead to condemn these dictators. If we don't get united, believe me, they will get united and they will end us, every single of us here.
Let me just get back to Yelitsa, and then you'll have a chance to come back, but we're trying to stay in line.
Sorry, we got very emotional because we know that we'll be being in touch with the victims as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Your passion is of course, contagious. Thank you. So, Yelitsa, I'd like to come back to you, particularly on the topic of shrinking spaces, those that affect people's freedom to use their own mother tongue, their own language. What role does language play in assuring artistic expression, as well as participation in cultural life and other rights enshrined in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People?
Language is a very powerful tool, as we've said earlier. Our voice is our power. This is a big weapon that we have. Each language in this community is, in fact, that. It's our tool, our weapon, so we can move around the world. And contrary to what many people may think, indigenous people come to learn from the rest of society. That is not true. It is a knowledge exchange. The society, which does not speak our languages, can learn from them too, and they can discover other things about the stories of our past, and we learn how other things. That's exactly what it is. It's an exchange between those who speak it and those who do not. We need to have more spaces to share all this information, and that is essential. It is fair to bring to every corner of the world everything that is happening, things that we may not know, but we have to be very careful how we do this. Because, as we all know, social media can be a big communication tool, but if you don't use it right, then it could really take us to the other extreme, which is disinformation. People don't read as much. People don't try and read to understand what's happening. You just kind of read the title, and then you start talking about what you think it's happening. And then things get distorted. Information gets distorted. Then what is happening with this disinformation once it misinformation? what's happening is that community radios take what's closer, and they end up not bringing the right information or precise information. What's happening in different places in the world are sometimes coming to you through only one media, which is not actually bringing the actual news. This happens often in indigenous communities. There are genocides, there are attacks, but you only learn that in that place. But if you are not there, everything looks fine, nothing happened, so you're surprised about the fact that that news did not reach elsewhere. That's a big problem, right? When you talk about genocide in the indigenous communities, this is difficult, hard subject. People don't know about it. Many people around us do not know that. It's very, very sad. So I think it is important to continue to have this media in native languages, and for these media to have external links so that they can share what is happening in the communities, not just bring information, but also webcast information, share the information of what's happening inside.
Of course, the reason we're focusing on human rights in this panel and the whole theme is this year is the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as well as the 30th anniversary of the World Press Freedom Day. So I come back to you, Agnes. Human rights organizations such as Amnesty International have for years rung the alarm on many threats to human rights. And thank you for doing that. It's everyone's responsibility to do that, actually. In your view, what are the most pressing current challenges to human rights?
Well, I think the first challenge is that we are confronting too many challenges at the same time. In my entire work as a human rights person for close to 30 years now, I don't think I've ever lived in a period where we are looking at forces that are intertwined, that are overlapping with one another, that are creating existentialist challenges for us, from climate change to superpowers vying for hegemony, to growing inequality within state, between state, to an information technology industrial revolution that is so overwhelming that it is probably going to change what it means to be human. For all those reasons, and probably many more, I'm not talking about demography between increasing youth population in the impoverished countries and increasing old population in the richer part of the world. All of those forces are coming together to create really large challenges for us. So that's, I will say, the first big problem, is that we have too many to confront. The second is that we have no international system to respond that can respond to those challenges effectively. International governance has always been, at best, pretty weak. Over the last 75 years, I think right now it is paralyzed and ineffective. We do not have an international system that works. The Security Council is, I think, the best example of this paralysis. The normative framework is being challenged. Russia's aggression of Ukraine is a perfect example of a disruption that is meant to completely transform the fledgling rule of law that we had. So that, I will say, the second challenge. We have no global system capable of responding to the most incredible, life-shattering challenges, existentialist challenges for us and for our planet. The third challenge is that we are losing the fight for human rights and democracy in the very country that until recently were kind of pushing for that. We were talking about surveillance and we were talking about freedom of expression being shrinking. It's shrinking everywhere, not just in the so-called autocracies part of the world. There is a recent report that has been published by V Democracy last month, where they basically said, and I quote, it concluded that the global state of democracy has returned to the level of 1986. 1986, effectively more than cancelling the wave of democratization that followed the collapse of the Berlin Wall and the freedom of Nelson Mandela. Right now, there are more countries autocratizing, if that's English, than democratizing. And one of the starkest indicators of this rising autocracy is the attacks on freedom of the press and on freedom of expression. It is not just what's happening in Iran or in Russia that should worry us, although it should worry us a lot. It is also what's happening here. Who is imprisoning Julian Assange? Who is creating more laws to curtail the freedom to protest? You know, all of those indicators and trends are occurring within the so-called democracy of the world. So the third challenge is that sadly, the playbook of autocracy, the playbook of control over conscience or control over speech has been well learned by our so-called democratic leaders. That is what we are confronting. Thank you.
Thank you for that sobering remark. Mindful of the time, and we still have a video message to play from the High Commissioner for Human Rights, I would like to pose one last question to all of you to set the discussion and help prepare for the following panels in today's program. Today's theme is shaping a future of rights. What can all of us in the audience here, individually, people watching, do to protect and promote the freedom of expression and all other human rights in the future? Maybe you start with you, David, because you're on my right.
Thank you. I just want to say it's such an honor to be on this panel with these three incredibly brave activists. I'm a journalist. I'm not supposed to be an activist overtly, but I just couldn't agree more with what each of them has said. And I guess my simple thing is to speak, to vote, to communicate with each other, to not be despondent, to not go silent, to talk to each other online, to talk to each other in person, to rhyme, as we saw at the beginning of this event. Because I think, again, the reason these forces are fighting back so aggressively and trying to silence us is because the power of our voices, the power of the way we use technology now threatens them. There is a way we communicate with each other that I think touches each of us, that we connect as human beings. Human beings want basic human rights. Human beings want a say over their government. Human beings want a right to free, accurate information that journalists provide. So I guess that's very simple, or maybe too broad, but it's very much about communicating, being hopeful, being determined, and being open to change, and being open to hope. This is a critical moment, I think, in history, and I think there's opportunities and there's ways that we're all succeeding. If you look at these three other panelists, each of them has done amazing work on themselves or through their own work. And if we despair, if we're apathetic, if we're cynical, that's what those who want to silence us want us to do.
Thank you. I mean, you can't say you're not an activist and knowing as a journalist you've been imprisoned, you've been kidnapped, and yet you continue to deliver and you want to policy. So you're in the same category.
Facts matter. Talking to people matters. Getting information out matters, and we all have to keep trying.
And thank you for all the work you do. Thank you. So, Yelitza?
Considero que lo importante.
I believe that it's important not to remain silent. If we are silent, if our voices are silenced, we would have gone back too far back. We need to inform ourselves before we share whatever it is that we're reading, so we do not fall on this distorted information or misinformation. And also, above all, empathy. There's many people that risk their lives in order to publish truthful information. And sometimes we judge without knowing. We just believe what's being read or what people make you believe. I think empathy is a crucial element in all this, and also respect. Respect for dignified work that's being carried out, the respect towards our diversity in the way that it is being carried out. And also it's worth mentioning that I say this because I'm referring to the media outlets in the native languages, because on many occasions they're judged by doing this without really knowing that it is being done to change the lives of many people who are listening to them. Because you wouldn't imagine how wonderful it is when you listen or hear something or read something in your own language, and information or a piece that you are reading. It is wonderful.
So, Messi, over to you.
Yeah, I want to be very honest with you guys. I mean, I admire your work, hard work, but I want to say that as far as we see that women of Afghanistan are being kicked out from schools, from universities, just because of being women, we cannot say that we're just a journalist and we want to cover the story. We have to be loud and condemn gender apartheid. When we see that women of Iran, schoolgirls, teenagers are facing rape, chemical attacks, just because of being girls and want to have freedom of choice, then we cannot sit down in our media, in New York Times, CNN, Channel 4, Le Monde, Figaro, and saying that we are just journalists. We want to cover the story. We have to be activists. We have to be their voices. When George Floyd got killed brutally, what happened? The whole world got united, rightfully condemned that. Nobody said that, okay, we're just a journalist. So this is my problem, and the problem of many women in Iran and Afghanistan, that when it comes to women's rights in the Middle East, people say, shh, let them deal with it. We are just the leaders of the member states. There are many high representatives from the EU. They went to Iran. They obeyed compulsory hijab in front of the Islamic Republic. Even here, the US envoy for Afghanistan, she wore hijab. She bowed to the Taliban on US soil. So why? Because she said that, this is not my job to be an activist. Be an activist when you see a gender apartheid regime. I want you. Yes. How many women are here? Hands up. How many women are here? If you were being kicked out from a school, if you were being under the target of chemical attack, what would have been the reaction of the rest of the world? Women are being kicked out from a stadium just because of being women. When we go to FIFA, when we go to journalists, to activists, to the leaders of democratic countries, they say that, this is your culture. No, calling barbaric law part of our culture, this is an insult to a nation. And I want you to be with us, women of Iran and Afghanistan. Be activists and be our voice to condemn and isolate gender apartheid regime. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Agnes.
We need to resist the onslaught on human rights. We need to resist when they attack our rights, when they kick us out of school. We need to resist, but that's not enough. We need to disrupt. We need to disrupt their status quo. We need to disrupt their sense of power. We need to disrupt their sense of we're doing as well as we can. We need to disrupt them. We need to attack and disrupt the double standard that we witness everywhere. Resist, disrupt, and we need to reconstruct. Because that's not good enough to leave it to them to reconstruct. We cannot leave it to them to reimagine the UDHR for the next century. We cannot leave it to them to reimagine press freedom for the next century, for our centuries, for the next generation. We need to reconstruct together, and I can assure you, I know for a fact, I've been with you for many years, I've been with human rights activists for many years. We have it in us to reimagine a normative system, an international system, and a national system that can work for us, that can work for human rights, that can work for press freedom. Resist, disrupt, reconstruct. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we have a video message from the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Mr. Volker Turk, who could not be with us here in person today. He is in Nairobi, and we should have that playing now.
Warm greetings to all. Thank you to UNESCO for the invitation. It's an honor to participate in this essential conference. Freedom of expression is not just a fundamental human right. It is the lifeblood that nourishes healthy and vibrant societies. Without freedom of expression, we cannot challenge injustice, spark change, or engage in the debates that make us fundamentally human. We cannot hold those in power to account. Without freedom of expression, which is a great enabler of all our other rights, there is little freedom at all. Regardless of frontiers, this was the promise of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights when it affirmed our right to freedom of expression and access to information. But as we mark 30 years of World Press Freedom Day, all around the world, we are seeing the forceful closure of those frontiers and an alarming and aggressive trend towards the shutdown of freedom of speech. And although journalists are some of its most critical conduits, equipping the world with information and facts, we see a new normal where they face mounting threats. A new normal of outright silencing of the people who work to inform, expose, and hold those in power to account. Through defamation, censorship, routine media shutdowns, arbitrary arrest, or direct online and physical attacks on them, their friends and their families, women journalists in particular often work in fear of violence and harassment. In 2022, 87 journalists were killed, the vast majority with impunity. A record 323 were imprisoned. These are intolerable statistics. Journalism is not a crime, yet an artillery of new laws and lawsuits tell a different story. Under the guise of criminal cyber libel, anti-terrorism, cybersecurity, and fake news laws, more than ever, governments can stifle journalists and conceal inconvenient truths. Restrictions on freedom of expression must be the exception, and they can be, with stronger national legislation that puts human rights first, with better monitoring of threats against journalists, and better legal and psychological support provided to them when harms occur. And crucially, with systematic investigation and prosecution of crimes against journalists. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is our guardrail. As we celebrate its 75th anniversary this year, my office will devote the month of May to celebrating critical voices and debate, to ensuring the safety of journalists, and to protecting the civic space. In January, I called on governments to release all people who are arbitrarily detained, whether for exercising their rights or by contravention of their rights, including, of course, journalists and human rights defenders jailed for doing their essential work. I repeat that call today. Every threat to a journalist is a direct attack on freedom of information, opinion, and expression, fundamental rights that belong to all of us. The safety of journalists is not just a question of personal security, it is a question of the safety and health of entire societies. It is a moral imperative for the future of all of us that we do everything possible to protect it.
Thank you, High Commissioner, for these powerful words that perfectly summarize the message that we want to convey today. The safety and protection of journalists and freedom of expression is not just a question of personal security, it is a question of the safety and health of the entire society. Thank you to our distinguished panelists, and thank you for being with us today. Thank you.
I think we can all agree there the bravery of the activists we saw there, their call to action, and of course a lot of time devoted to talking about the double-edged